Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm taking a look at April's sun and rising sign horoscopes. So this is for April 2021, and I've got 4 transits that I've got my eye on this month. So we're going to go through those for each of the 12 signs, starting with Aries. We'll go around the wheel. I always like to remind people that I recommend reading the sign that matches your ascendant. So read for your rising sign or listen for your rising sign. I think that works the best. It's going to correspond with the whole sign house version of your birth chart, and you're going to find that syncs up with exactly the way your birth chart looks. So that's what I recommend. Also, there are, five, maybe 4 or 5 other transits that I'm not covering in this video because I don't think that they are as impactful. So I always try to narrow down my transit list for the month to a couple of transits that I think are going to be the most important and talk about those for each of the 12 signs. So this month we are going to talk about a sequence from Venus that is coming late in April, and also a sequence from the sun with Uranus that's coming at the very end of the month. There are some other transits throughout the month. There's a big new moon on the 11th. There's a nice Mars trine Jupiter on the 16th. So there are a few other transits, but I will be mentioning those transits as the month goes on, and may even break down the horoscope configurations for those transits as the month goes on, just in case people are like, hey, I really want to hear about that. Stay tuned, because I probably will end up breaking those down for each of the 12 signs as well. So anyway, all right, let's dive in. So we're going to start with Aries, and we are going to move through these particular transits that I'm looking at this month, starting between April 22nd and 24th. To me, this is where the heart of the action is at for the month, and I'll try to explain why. At this time of the month, you're going to see a couple of transits from Venus that are just really potent, and a transit from Mars that is really potent. So here's what we're looking at. You can see that Venus is going to move into a conjunction with the planet Uranus, and then Venus is going to immediately go through a square to Saturn. That sequence happens between the 22nd and the 24th. Now, at the exact same time that that's happening, you're going to see on the 23rd, Mars will move into Cancer. This is a big transit because Mars is going to be in its fall. And then finally, by the end of the month on the 30th, you'll see the last transit for the month that I'm looking at, which is going to be the conjunction of the sun with Uranus. That's going to be happening right over the place that Venus conjoined with Uranus. So it's kind of reprising that. So a lot of action from Venus and Taurus this month. That's where the focus is. And then a big shift from Mars. So let's go ahead and break it down. Let's go back to the 22nd through the 24th and take a look at what Venus is doing here. So first of all, you can see that Venus conjoining with the planet Uranus is in your second house of money, resources, finances, anything or anyone that you rely on as a source of immediate and direct support for you, your body, your livelihood, your health, your your material resources and things like that. So there could be a rather sudden shift around money or resources this month, perhaps also involving friends, relationships, groups of people, or your social life, because Venus is going through a conjunction with erratic and changeable Uranus, which can cause some shifts or some sudden disruptions, as well as innovation and newness or creativity relative to finances or resources. But then Venus is going to go right through a square to Saturn. And that square to Saturn in the 11th house could mean that there are also challenges when it comes to friends or relationships. Venus square Saturn is sometimes challenging for relationships. It will challenge the integrity of a relationship, or it will be a testing period for relationships. So the balance between money, resources, and changes happening in that area of life, and also some deeper and more heavier or weightier themes around friends or your social life, allies, perhaps groups of people that you belong to. So watch for those themes to really pop between the 22nd and the 24th. Now, right in the mix of that, you're also going to see Mars changing signs. And when Mars changes signs, especially as an Aries, because this is your ruling planet, you're going to see Mars go into its fall in the fourth house. Now, that's going to last all the way from April 23rd to June 11th. So it's a long transit, and Mars is debilitated in Cancer in its fall. So watch for the potential for conflict around home or family, parents, things pertaining to Cancerian fourth house topics. That's typically going to be things like your family or domestic life, parents, children, home and hearth, property, land, your living environment. And the god of war entering that sign can bring certain kinds of challenges all the way until June 11th. So, that is also something that could somehow play a role in relation to the things happening in groups among allies or friends and with money or resources. You could see all of those topics sort of congealing in a very powerful way toward the end of the month. Now, on the 30th of the month, you're also going to see uh, the sun conjoin with Uranus. Now, that could, what I like about Uranus in the second house, especially given that the sun is going to conjoin it at the end of this month, is that even if there's some hiccups or disruptions around money and finances, the potential for a kind of revolution, new insights and epiphanies that could lead to greater freedom and greater independence, or shedding things that might feel more restrictive. There's a strong impulse toward freedom, originality, and inventiveness that's going to come through this month too. And you might feel that a little bit more towards the 30th. So if there's some more like disruptive, chaotic energy between the 22nd and the 24th, look for a breakthrough by the 30th. All right. So that is what I've got for Aries on the ascendant. If you're in Aries rising, we're going to put Taurus on the ascendant and do this again. So we're going to go through the same exact sequence now from the 22nd through the 30th of the month. Again, this is what I'm highlighting as the most important period of the month for all signs this month. So let's go ahead and take a look. And actually, let me just get rid of one thing that might be a little confusing for people to see. So, and actually, and one more thing I'm going to do here. Let's just take out things that we're not going to be using here to keep the view a little bit cleaner. All right, so if you're a Taurus, this is in your home sign in first house. And the Venus Uranus conjunction is often about the need to incorporate Venus Uranus into your body, into your mind, into your actual physical person or your mental space. Venus Uranus is provocative and inventive, sensual and rebellious, creative and inspired, but may also be dealing with, while that there's the need for some kind of personal breakthrough, that there are also pressing duties, responsibilities, or constraining forces at work within your constraining forces at work in your professional life or in the workplace, and that's the square to Saturn. So a little bit of a push-pull between kind of serious, heavy Saturn and this need for revolution and freedom personally that'll be presenting itself in your first house. So that's particularly intense, and I would be careful of, either the impulse to limit or restrain yourself and some creative force that's seeking expression, or on the other hand, to be so intent on personal freedom and expression that you neglect some kind of duty or responsibility. Either extreme would be something to watch for. Now, remember, by the end of the month, you're going to get the sun conjoining Uranus on the 30th. So let's just fast forward and see how that takes place. Here you go. And you can see Sun Uranus conjoining right there. And that's the kind of breakthrough moment where, there again, Saturn's present from the square. So, but this is the moment of clarity and insight and the need for greater personal freedom and autonomy, like almost like a time of, relieving yourself of burdens or obligations, or finding a creative way to feel freer while also taking care of your obligations or responsibilities at work or something like that. But this is a moment of breakthrough that comes at the end of the month for you. Now, if we wind this back just a little bit and take a look at April 23rd, Mars is going to enter its fall in your third house. Now, that's the place of siblings, neighbors, and that's things happening in and around your home or domestic life, things happening in your kind of immediate environment. It speaks to your mind and just kind of the quality of your mental life. When Mars is in its fall in this house all the way until June 11th now, April 23rd to June 11th, you have to watch for a more turbulent and combative mental and emotional quality just in your field for a bit of time. And that could manifest also in relationships with people, friends, neighbors, siblings, people who are like family or who live in and around your environment, potential for contentiousness in your everyday space, and maybe a tendency toward passive aggression or unhealthy emotional volatility. But also the potential with this transit is going to be to um, almost like to find greater force, clarity, and strength when it comes to expressing your emotions and your thoughts. So, executive mental and emotional intelligence looks good. Be careful of the volatility that's there. And that transit's going to be there for a while. So, just know that karma around those topics could be cooking for a little bit. Okay, so that's what it looks like if you're a Taurus rising. And again, this sequence to me is the most powerful of the month. Now, let's go ahead and let's put Gemini up on the ascendant. So if you're a Gemini rising, let's wind it back and take a look at this sequence toward the later part of April. Um, the sequence starts with Venus conjoining Uranus and then Venus squaring Saturn. So if you're a Gemini rising, the thing that you have to be very careful of is the um, the potential for almost like ideological conflicts this month. Venus Uranus in the 12th, square Saturn in the moral, high-minded, sort of religious, pious ninth house is going to be looking at principles and laws and rules and um, in almost the question of integrity and beliefs and um, one's commitments ethically or philosophically, religiously, or even just it speaks to maybe an academic environment that with a certain degree of formality or but there's potential for extremes here ideologically, religiously, spiritually, and also for the potential of rebellion or the need to break out of some kind of box. And this could be more contentious around um, what do I want to say? Your relationships could feature philosophical tension or argumentation and the potential to burn bridges by means of, you know, getting really fixated and maybe even rigid about thoughts or ideas or beliefs is there, but also the potential to be alienated or excluded or judged by someone else's standards could be there as well. I would also see this as a moment of looking at the behaviors, attitudes, thoughts, or ideas that are helpful in your life versus those that aren't. And I would see these as big themes between the 22nd and the 24th in particular. Now, um, in the middle of that, well, actually, let me jump to the end. So by April 30th, the sun will conjoin Uranus in the 12th house. Now, this could speak to an epiphany and a breakthrough in terms of understanding things that have been happening and in terms of having some kind of aha moment that helps you through some of the stuckness from that 22nd to 24th period. I also think that this could be the moment of potentially making some kind of impulsive or reckless decision. Sometimes you feel really inspired to do something or to break free of some kind of limit or convention in your life that feels, um, you know, rigid or outdated, and so you'll do it, but the way in which you do it will not be correct, or it'll sort of burn a bridge, or you'll shoot yourself in the own foot or something. So this is a breakthrough, but because it's in the 12th house, I would just be careful how you create freedom, how you pursue the creative impulse toward the end of the month is just as important as the impulse itself. Now, in the mix of that, on the 23rd, you're going to see Mars enter Cancer, where it will then stay until June 11th. Now, that's going to be potentially providing you with some challenges around money, finances, and resources. Um, the different kinds of demands that are being placed on you, the kinds of needs that you have or that others may have, and a potential drain on resources or challenges or conflicts around money and finances, spending habits, So those are the kinds of things to watch for. And I'm highlighting this transit not to bum everybody out, but to make sure that everyone is forewarned, because this transit lasts a while. And for most people, that's going to provide, because Mars is in its fall, it's going to provide some difficulties in the house and related to the topics of the house. So watch for some challenges around money and finances, investments, and also changes that need to be made that, perhaps that's the silver lining of this, is that Mars may provoke something, but as a result, you get really clear about what changes you have to make around money, finances, and resources. So watch for those energies, especially from the 23rd of the month onward, all the way to June 11th. All right, so we're going to put Cancer on the ascendant next. So when we put Cancer on the ascendant, the 22nd through the 24th, still our target period, but now that's going to fall in your 11th house. So you're going to see Venus conjoining Uranus in the 11th and squaring Saturn in the 8th. Now, this transit will bring up the conversations around your social life, communities of people that you belong to, among colleagues, or maybe in the kind of um, the social area of your work life. Venus Uranus in the 11th suggests the need for revolution, independence, creativity, originality, but it can also speak to a kind of disruptive, erratic, or chaotic quality that impacts your relationships in those same places: groups, friends, colleagues, allies. It could mean that there is a break from a relationship, the transformation of a relationship. It could also mean that the need for, um, some kind of innovative and creative quality is there, for creative collaborations, but maybe some rebellious quality as well that's permeating groups, friends, communities. And then with the square to Saturn that's happening in the 8th, you get the feeling of different kinds of debts or obligations that you're held to. I want to rebel, but I have an obligation to someone else, or someone else expects something of me. And this could also be about defying or directly going against something that some other people feel that you owe them or that they expect from you. So I would think a lot about this one, about your social life, about the expectations of others in your life, and about the need to free yourself. But you have to be very careful, because Saturn could easily take something away from you, if you are not being conscientious about other people and the web of relationships that you need to honor in your life. Now, during that same period, if it's a Cancer rising on April 23rd, Mars is going to enter your first house and home sign, all the way until June 11th. Now, the problem here is that this can have a very personal impact on you as a Cancer, and it's a difficult placement for Mars. Health can be a concern, moods, temper, potential challenges around family members or conflicts within the family, around the home. So watch for between April 23rd and June 11th for there to be the potential for an atmosphere of kind of emotional intensity. Now, this is also a great transit on some levels for things like, I'm going to hit the pool and swim every day, or get to the gym. And Mars can energize you and spur action that's meaningful, that, needs to happen. And of course, the downside is the potential for emotional conflict in family or home, potential challenges around health in the body. It's temporary. It only lasts till June 11th, but you should be aware of it. Okay, so that's what I've got for Cancer rising for the month. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to switch to Leo rising. So, if you're a Leo rising, what we are looking at is the 22nd to the 24th, with Venus being in your 10th house of career. So, this sequence between the 22nd and the 24th is, um, pitting the 7th house of relationships against the 10th house of career in a kind of tense dynamic. Venus and Uranus in the 10th house are going to try to create and innovate and make changes happen, like a little mini revolution or renaissance in your career. There's sparks of creativity, enthusiasm, also the possibility for a little bit of disruption in relationships in the workplace as well, or a kind of let's call it a meaningful chaos that comes up in relationships in the workplace. And then you can see Venus is also going to square Saturn by the 24th in the seventh house. So as much as you might be trying to evolve or change your actions or activities in the world or the workplace, creativity, originality, independence, revolution being the banner of this transit in the career house or in the house that relates to actions that you take in the world, you're also going to be dealing with the expectations and more conservative nature of Saturn in the seventh that's trying to call your attention to relationships with other people, the needs or commitments that you have to other people, the way that relationships are holding you back for better or worse. So there's going to be the contractive or conservative element of Saturn calling that for Venus to be um, more. It can clip Venus's wings a little bit, or it can make sure that Venus is being mature and careful about whatever kind of creative um, activities Venus is trying to put forward in the career house. So watch for tension between those two areas. Now, at the end of the month on the 30th, the sun is going to get involved, and you're going to see the sun conjoin Uranus. And that transit can be about a kind of creative breakthrough. So I like the idea of a big creative breakthrough in the career house this month, but it is definitely being checked by Saturn in the house of relationships. Those Saturn's expectations and obligations are checking that for everyone this month, but in different places and in different areas. So between career and relationships for you as a Leo rising. Now, on the 23rd, you're also going to see Mars hop into the sign of Cancer in your 12th house. It's going to be there all the way until June 11th. The downside of this transit is that Mars in the 12th house can mean that you are dealing with undermining influences, potentially from home or family or in relationship to family members or people who have intense emotional needs or demands that they're making on you. So Mars in Cancer can speak to a long period of time that you're dealing with now up until June 11th, the day after an eclipse, by the way, on June 10th. So it'll be a relief when Mars enters your first house. You'll be feeling very energized, and if you feel like you're losing control mentally, emotionally, or if there tends to be your own worst qualities are undermining you a bit here or there, or you're finding that other people are undermining you, or that you're dealing with drama in general, that will pass. That's not going to last forever, but it is a period of time where Mars in the 12th can bring up, just all different kinds of weightier and more difficult conflicts with other people. So watch for that all the way until June 11th. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put Virgo on the ascendant. So if you're a Virgo rising, this sequence that we're looking at this month is going to come between the 22nd and the 24th, between your ninth and sixth house. Venus in the ninth with Uranus is interesting because this is a philosophical, religious, spiritual house, a house that pertains to learning, travel. Venus and Uranus there will often represent a kind of aesthetic, intellectual breakthrough. I would consider, for example, Venus and Uranus to be in the ninth house to be a good sign of someone who is maybe a feminist or is a teacher of feminist theory or something like that. Or Venus Uranus could be a way of addressing things related to the goddess or women or the feminine in a way that's both academic, intellectual, political, legal, innovative, rebellious, original. So also Venus Uranus in the ninth house is about creating like any relationship that you have, and the way that your values in those relationships coincide or conflict. That could be a big part of your month from this late part of April, basically saying, hey, look, are we on the same page? Do our values conflict? Do they coincide with one another? Or do they, are they shared? And if not, then how are we handling that? You could also find that there's more almost like ideological rigidity with Saturn in the sixth, a place that was traditionally called the joy of Mars and can speak to not militancy, but could be that, but it also just kind of a way of being very, very principled and hardworking about things. So I could see this as being almost like almost like a sectarian kind of energy that's coming through, or the temptation to define principles and act with a kind of severity or um, principled, committed ideas and beliefs, and also some kind of rebellious and defiant energy, all wrapped into one. So that's what I'm seeing there from the 22nd to the 24th. There is some kind of breakthrough for you happening this month, mentally or spiritually or intellectually, and you'll see that reiterated on the 30th when the sun hits Uranus in the ninth house, which for many people is going to act as a kind of breakthrough. The need for greater freedom mentally and intellectually is there this month. Just don't get rigid about it, because if you do, then ironically, you'll be shutting down the very openness that you fought so hard to obtain. Now, on the 23rd, you can see that Mars is going to move into Cancer in your 11th house. And that will be in that space, you're going to see the in the area of groups, friends, allies, colleagues, coworkers, the potential for a little bit of drama, hostility, competition, difficulty. Um, yeah, you could see that happening, perhaps between, this is the 23rd of April, goes all the way until June 11th. Um, Oftentimes, it's going to result in potential fallouts or conflicts with friends or within groups. The other thing might be some kind of dynamism related to friends or family and friends. And what do I want to say? Mars likes to take action. And so, what are you starting, or what new things are developing? What actions are you taking relative to your social life? This could be the desire to initiate some new kind of, to participate in a new group, or to initiate changes within a group that you belong to. But Mars will want to take a lot of action around the 11th house: friends, groups, greater communities of people, cultures that you identify with. And there could be some drama, and also, the momentum and the energy to move forward with things. It could be a little emotionally conflicted. So you can expect that. And this isn't that long of a transit, but it does last until June 11th. So just to be aware of that. Okay, so we're going to turn the wheel again now, and we're going to put Libra on the ascendant. Now, when we put Libra on the ascendant, you're looking at Venus conjoining Uranus in the 8th house, and there's a square with Saturn in the 5th house, and that comes through again the 22nd through the 24th. To me, this is the biggest transit of the month for everyone. And with Venus and Uranus in your 8th house, and then the sun will conjoin Uranus in the 8th house by the 30th as well, you're looking at the need to break free from dependencies that are no longer healthy. The potential for there to be a kind of death and rebirth motif, the need for sort of, you could say, sexual freedom or interpersonal freedom, the need for experimentation. But the 8th house tends to entangle us very deeply within relationships with others, obligations to other people, and so forth. And so Venus Uranus likes to be free from those kinds of things. Venus Uranus will seek to free itself from anything that feels like uh, enclosing or like repressive. So the need to liberate from anything that feels like an obligation or an attachment that's unhealthy. That's going to be a big part of the motivation of Venus around this time. It's square to Saturn, which happens by the 24th, will also bring up the potential way in which our good fortune depends upon other people. The 5th house that Saturn is in was called the house of good fortune. Saturn is in a superior square to Saturn and to Venus and Uranus. And so I could see this energy being one that says, well, I'd like to break free or break out of something, but Saturn is saying, no, look, if you do that, something good will be taken away from you, or the potential to lose something that you need or depend upon will be taken away from you. The reason for that is that Saturn in the house of good fortune is going to potentially act like a check on the need for that Venus has to break free. On the other hand, you could say that, look, if I break free from something or if I make some kind of sudden change, then something better awaits me. But you have to be careful, because if you burn bridges and hurt other people's feelings just because something better awaits on the other side, that could complicate things later. So Saturn is also saying, be careful of what you long for and rush toward right now. Be careful of the desires and how they're impacting you and what you're willing to do to get what you want. Be careful, because that might have long-term ramifications. And also any kind of refinement around sex, pleasure, happiness, the difference between healthy or unhealthy approaches to those things may be a part of what you're dealing with. Now, during that same, remember, the sun kind of creates, re-emphasizes the same themes by the 30th, when it also conjoins Uranus in the 8th. So you're looking for some kind of breakthrough this month. You're trying to throw off the chains that bind you. Now, on April 23rd, you're going to see Mars enter Cancer, and that's your career house. Now, that's going to be there all the way until June 11th, potentially providing you with a little bit of stress or tumultuousness around your career or the workplace for a few months. It's not the end of the world, but I'm telling everyone about this not to bum people out, but so that people are forewarned. If you have, Libra rising, it's the potential for there to be a degree of, well, there's a couple of ways. One is just going to be stress or conflict in the workplace. The other one is going to be that it's hard for you to work somehow because of something that you're dealing with, either your body, your health, your family, some other area of life, your relationship that is demanding your attention and making it difficult to get things done. Can also result in some kind of public controversy or something difficult that happens in your life, in probably around family or relationships. Mars in Cancer tends to bring those things up, that will occupy your time and energy from, say, the 23rd through the 11th. That's a period of time that's like, okay, there's for Mars in Cancer to be in that angular house. Don't be surprised if the drama around home, family, and relationships just demands a lot of your attention. But it's short-lived. It's not going to last forever. So, and it's good to know what's there. Now, on the other hand, Mars in the 10th can be very energizing. You can get a lot of things done, but you do have to be careful about the potential for the emotional drama, almost like a boiling pot of water that's there in your career house. So that is the outlook for Libra rising. Let's move on to Scorpio rising. So if you're a Scorpio rising, this sequence that I'm looking at happens between the 22nd and the 24th. It involves Venus conjoining Uranus in your 7th house, which is the place of relationships, square to Saturn in the 4th house of home and family. So Venus and Uranus in the 7th house want experimentation, revolution, freedom, individuality. It creates big changes in relationships, oftentimes breakups, but sometimes just the need for some kind of healthy revolution. Sometimes it needs to kink things up a little bit in your love life. Sometimes it needs to, experiment and date around. But Venus Uranus is seeking for a revolution in relationships, as is the Sun Uranus by April 30th. So there's this need for greater freedom and individuation relative to your relationships, pushing through by the end of the month. However, it is catching on Saturn in the 4th house of home and family. And the demands or expectations or limitations or considerations that are on your mind in that area of life that will be pulling on Venus and, her need, let's say, for greater freedom or independence. So let's keep our eye on that. Now, that's a pretty simple, to me, it's pretty simple, compact areas to talk about when they're angular like that. But on the 23rd, you're going to see a slightly more complicated transit that will be there for a while. And that's Mars entering the sign of Cancer in your 9th house, where it will stay all the way until June 11th. That's the place of religion, spirituality, higher education, a place related to travel in foreign countries as well. Now, this is your ascendant ruler if you're a Scorpio rising. So questions about belief, faith, questions about law or legalities, questions about foreign countries or travel, and potential turbulence or challenges around any or all of those topics. This would be an example this would be a time, for example, where you could see some philosophical, religious, ideological, or political turmoil within your family or within close relationships or with others, generally speaking. So you might be dealing with something around, your family's religious history or your family's political affiliation. It will also spur action in this area of life. So it's a good time to study something or research something, or maybe you're feeling inspired to speak out or take action on an issue that you feel very emotionally, you feel strongly about on an emotional level. So watch for that all the way until June 11th. Okay, that's Scorpio rising. Pretty straightforward with Scorpio rising between your 7th and your 4th. Now, I'd love to hear stories from my Scorpio rising people this month about that transit. I have a number of people in my life who have that one coming, and I have that bookmarked as a particularly intense one this month out of all the signs. So anyway, Sagittarius rising. Let's take a look. We're talking about the 22nd through the 24th, again, as the target period for Venus and Uranus and Venus square Saturn. The sun will come through by the 30th and reemphasize the same thing by virtue of conjoining Uranus. So what are we looking at? Well, the 6th and the 3rd house speak to certain degree of Mars-like activities and Moon-like activities. The 3rd house is called the joy of the Moon. The 6th house is called the joy of Mars. So that can mean that there are going to be frustrating, challenging, or contentious energies in your mind or body or in the immediate environment during this time, especially with the need to break free from or defy other people's expectations of you in your relationships. There's a really powerful thing happening in your chart in June, which is that you're going to have this big lunar May 26th, you're going to have a lunar eclipse in your, first house, June 10th in your 7th. I get the feeling that this transit is going to be the prelude to a kind of like a big orchestral movement in your life around relationships by the month of June. But what you're dealing with in relationships right now, and the need to change your mind or change your thinking or change your relationships, deal with conflicts of value in your relationships or in your everyday life. You're trying to rearrange something, and you might have to overcome some obstacles or difficulties as you're doing it. You may also have to work through some of your own mental blind spots or your own mental, what do I want to say, stubbornness, and in order to create a change. And that change is going to have a social and relational dimension to it by the summer. So that's what I'm seeing happening for you between the 22nd and 24th. And that's re-emphasized by the sun hitting Uranus on the 30th and then going through the square with Saturn at the beginning of next month. In the meantime, on April 23rd, you're also going to see Mars enter the sign of Cancer. Now, that's entering your 8th house. So that's the place of, that's a turbulent place for Mars to enter. It speaks to soul contracts with other people, dependencies, attachments, healthy or unhealthy. It can speak to death and transformation, and it can speak to fear or anxiety about the future. So there's a more turbulent energy coming through your life between April 23rd and June 11th, and it could be asking you to rearrange a lot of things, both personally and interpersonally, again, by the time this is all done in June. Interestingly, as it finishes in your 8th house, Mars does, on June 11th, just the day before, you'll have a solar eclipse in your 7th house of relationships as Mercury is retrograde. So there is the need for kind of death and rebirth motif around relationships and dealing with your principles and the need for revolution if relationships are not healthy and matching values with one another. And that's what I'm seeing here, but also looking at potential for changes or challenges around, family. The death and rebirth theme around family with Mars and Cancer in the 8th. That's from April 23rd all the way to June 11th. Sagittarians, also Scorpios and Sagittarians this month. I feel like you guys have some of the more challenging expressions of these transits. I'd love to hear how it ends up going. Don't email me though, put it in the YouTube comments. Okay. Because then I just get like inundated and I can't answer people and then I feel really bad about it. Okay, so let's go to Capricorn. Putting Capricorn on the ascendant, the same thing is happening between Venus and Uranus and Saturn. This is between your fifth and second. So first of all, if you have children, things around money, resources, finances, and kids could be an issue between the 22nd and 24th toward the end of the month. Expenses that come up. If you share, if you're, co-parenting with an ex or something, issues around, child support or something like that. Those would be some of the heavier things. You could also talk about making an investment in your children, or even people who are trying to get pregnant but have to spend some money, perhaps on an alternative form of fertility treatment. You could also look at this as issues around money being really important and the need for some kind of creative breakthrough or creative and what I want to say, a use of your money and resources that aids in some kind of creative urge or breakthrough. For example, someone who buys some new equipment to make music with, or someone who decides to sign up for a class that's going to help them uh, with a hobby that they're going to take a photography class, or they're going to buy some new photography equipment. Any kind of use of money or resources that goes toward the pursuit of something creative or fulfilling or joyful or even sexual. I mean, like, it's so funny, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen Venus conjoin Uranus in the fifth house, and a person is like, they're in their relationship, they're getting into like using some sex toys or something. Like, I know that's kind of like super mundane, but it's like the need for experimentation and breakthrough around things that give us joy, pleasure, or that are creative in nature, and then that is being tied into Saturn in the house of money or finances. It could also be that you're feeling like you need a creative revolution, but you feel constrained financially. I want to have fun, but like I can't go out because I don't have any money or something like that. But watch for the tension between finances and the house of pleasure and creativity. Also, children and money by the end of the month. And then you'll see that the sun hits Uranus on April 30th, and that'll re-emphasize the same themes. Now, the more challenging transit comes on the 23rd when Mars enters Cancer and goes into your seventh house of relationships. Oof, that one's difficult. From April 23rd all the way to June 11th, you've got the God of War in its fall in your house of marriage and relationships. Difficult things in marriage, conflicts in marriage, emotional turmoil, potential for passive aggressiveness in relationships, potential for challenges in a spouse or partner's family, not even necessarily related to you, just challenges coming into a spouse or partner's life, maybe also related to their job, their work, their family, their parents, things like that. So you want to be paying attention to those kinds of energies. It can also spur action in relationships, but I would be especially careful of the potential for conflict and power struggles in relationships, or just challenges coming in through that area of life all the way until June 11th. That's a difficult one for everyone, and I'm not trying to be a downer, just trying to make sure that people are aware of it. Okay, so Aquarius on the ascendant, we're taking that Uranus Venus energy and we are plugging it into the fourth house of home, family, and parents, and squaring it to Saturn in your own first house. So here there is this need for revolution on the home front, relationships in the home life and home life. Your living environment, the need for a makeover of some kind in that area of life, the need for revolution at the roots, let's call it. And then we're putting that into a square with Saturn in the first house. Saturn in the first house could mean I think the negative possibilities of this are going to be like, if you're an Aquarius rising, I am too rigid or stubborn to allow for some kind of revolution, freedom, creativity, and change that's trying to make itself present around my roots, around my living environment. On the other hand, it could be that this feeling of being at kind of like an existential crossroads if you're an Aquarius rising. Really, this started last spring in 2020 when Saturn briefly entered Aquarius, and now it's here for a couple of years. So you had the great conjunction in your first house. It's a year where there's a new era in your life is being born. And questions about identity, purpose, character, calling are coming up toward the end of this month against this need for change and innovation around family, home, and roots. So you'll see that reiterated on the 30th when the sun conjoins Uranus in the fourth house, also seeking some kind of breakthrough around roots, but then pushing back on Saturn again by the early part of May. Now, if we go forward on the 23rd all the way until June 11th, Mars is going to be in the sign of Cancer, and that will be in your sixth house. Now, that is the joy of Mars, the sixth house. So it gets a little bit of a break compared to how difficult this transit is going to be for a lot of other people. Mars and Cancer should be more constructive in your sixth house. It'll be able to mobilize and deal with stressors, especially around home, family, parents, potential sickness or stressors in your life around those same topics. Maybe some stress in the workplace. Mars does rule your 10th house, possibly around siblings. It rules your third house. But Mars in the sixth is, the hard emotional work. That's what I think that's the best remedy for this transit is to say, where do I have to do the more difficult, more vulnerable kind of emotional work within myself, within my relationships, at work? And if you do that, my sense is that this transit will be a lot more supportive. Now, the downside of this, of course, is going to be the potential for emotional volatility or potential for conflict or challenges around family, home, or health. So that's from April 23rd all the way to June 11th. All right, last but not least, let's go to Pisces rising. So if you are a Pisces rising, you're always waiting to last. Maybe at some point I'll work backward from Pisces to Aries, make the Aries wait. Well, that's the benefit of timestamps, isn't it? You can just jump around. Okay, so Venus and Uranus are conjoining 22nd through the 24th as Venus conjoins Uranus and then squares Saturn. So this is the dynamic. Now, the third house was related to the moon and to the mind and to your environment, the environment around you, the environment that surrounds your home, your roots. When Venus hits Uranus in the third, the need for fun, bubbly, creative, eccentric forms of communication or activity, the need to express yourself creatively, to write music, to write a blog, it's a pretty fun energy in the third house, and it should result in a kind of sensual, creative, Venusian, but also eccentric vibe. And that, however, is hitting Saturn in the 12th. Now, Saturn in the 12th could be the voice of, our inhibitions. It could be the voice of prohibition or restriction. It could be a controlling presence or person saying you can't do this or you can't think that. Or, on the other hand, you do want to be careful with this, that there isn't some kind of rebellious instinct or impulse that is contributing to your downfall. It doesn't have to be like an epic Hollywood downfall, but Saturn in the 12th very literally can be a sign of, in a square with Venus and Uranus, could be a sign of doing things that are rebellious or creative, but that end up undermining us, or that are self-defeating or self-destructive. This transit could also result in the need to break out of a period of isolation or solitude, almost like the need to socialize and to get out from some kind of reclusive mode. So the need to, for example, some people are getting vaccines, or people are just saying to hell with it. I have to get out of the house now, or something like that. Like, I could see the Pisces rising person needing some kind of social breakthrough in your life toward the end of the month. That's reiterated, of course, by the sun conjoining Uranus, and then the sun going into the square with Saturn from April 30th into the first couple of days of May. The other thing that's happening is on the 23rd, you're going to see Mars popping into your fifth house. Now, that's the place of creativity, children, joy, pleasure. So anything regarding children that could be more challenging or difficult. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but if you have Mars in the fifth house, sometimes you will see challenges with regard to getting pregnant or keeping a pregnancy. Sometimes you're going to see challenges with the attitude and behavior of your kids. Sometimes the topic of children, women and their protection or security, as opposed to, like the safety versus like abuse or something like that could be a part of the conversation. Also, questions about childhood and anger and child rearing and things like that could be a part of this. I'd also look at this as questions about um, the emotional cost of your um, of your behaviors. Like what is, you might do something or say something on impulse to have fun or to be self-expressive, and then there's a bill due emotionally, or you might end up getting into conflicts with people emotionally. So that Mars in the fifth can shoot off a little bit, and then there might be emotional conflict as a bill that's due later. So you want to be careful of that. I could also see Mars in the fifth house as anything that would be creative or joyful that involves the water and like sports, like kayaking or paddle boarding or swimming, or just anything that's joyful and in the water, as long as it's careful and not risky. So those are some things that come to my mind. All right, so we've gone through all 12 signs for the month. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this and that you have a really fantastic month of April. Like I said, there's some transits that I didn't cover earlier in the month. I'll be breaking those transits down as the month goes on, and probably breaking down for each of the signs as well. But this video would have been way too long. And if I had included them, and I always try to narrow it down to where I think the real action is, like what's the essence of this month. So as always, I'm an archetypal educated weatherman, so I'm doing my best to spin stories out of how I see the combinations, but I learn so much when you guys tell your stories in the chat box about what you see and what you experience given the placements discussed in these videos. So please feel free to do that in the chat box. I love hearing from you guys. Have a great month of April, and we'll talk again for each of the transits along the way. All right, bye.